Now, our top focus right now, what initially began as a conflict between Israel and Hamas militants has now rapidly spiraled into a regional security crisis, casting a shadow of uncertainty and instability over West Asia. In the latest, a drone attack on a base in Jordan has killed 3 American troops, while at least 34 U.S. soldiers are said to be injured in the attack. And it is the first time American military personnel have been killed by hostile fire in West Asia since the start of this war in Gaza. And according to U.S. officials, the attack happened at a remote logistics outpost in northeast Jordan called Tower 22, and along the country's shared borders with Syria and Iraq, where about 3,500 U.S. troops are stationed in Jordan. Now, the one-way attack drone hit near the outpost's living quarters, causing injuries that range from minor cuts to brain trauma. Moreover, the U.S. military base in Syria is just 20 kilometers north of this tower. Just last week, Iranian-backed militias had launched a barrage of ballistic missiles and rockets at Al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq. The U.S. President Joe Biden blames Iran-backed militants for this attack, and he vows to hold the perpetrators accountable and says that the U.S. will respond to the attack. Now, the U.S. Defense Secretary also blames the Iran-backed militias for these attacks. Lloyd Austin says that U.S. will respond at a time and place of their choice. An umbrella group for Iran-backed militants called the Islamic Resistance in Iraq has claimed responsibility for this attack, and the militant group says that the attacks on U.S. forces were carried out at several locations in Syria and Iraq. And post the drone attacks, Iran continues to stay on high alert. Although Tehran has dismissed reports of its alleged role in the strikes, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson says that the claims are made with specific political goals to reverse the realities of the region. Now, further adding that the claims indicate that they are influenced by third parties. Now, Jordan has condemned the terrorist attack on U.S. troops, and although, according to Oman, the drone attack that killed 3 U.S. troops did not occur on its territory, further adding that the attack targeted a base in Syria. Now, to talk to us more on this crisis that's playing out in Jordan, I am being joined by Dr. Hassan Al-Hassan, a senior fellow for Middle East policy at IISS. Welcome to the broadcast, Mr. Al-Hassan.
Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Al-Hassan, I'll begin with my first question. Now, this has clearly spiraled into a regional security crisis. First time an American military personnel has been killed by hostile fire in West Asia since the start of this war in Gaza. How, in your opinion, is the U.S. likely to react?
Well, it's actually somewhat surprising that it has taken so long for us to see U.S. casualties, given the large number of attacks that Iran-backed groups have conducted against U.S. forces in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, or the Red Sea, and now in Jordan. That may have been a combination of several factors, including the fact that these militias may have been calibrating their attacks to some extent. It could be down to the sophistication of U.S. air defenses, sheer luck, or a combination of these factors. Let's not forget as well that the U.S. had conducted strikes on Baghdad earlier this month that ended up killing a militia leader belonging to Harakat al-Nujaba. And so there are a number of factors that can be pointed to. The U.S., I think, will try to respond in a way that, on the one hand, establishes some form of punishment. The U.S. cannot let this attack go unanswered, lest, of course, it invites further attacks. And at the same time, it will attempt to do so in a way that does not invite or that does not create a larger risk for even broader and deadlier escalation.
And Doctor, now in the past we have seen the U.S. target top Iranian commander and Qasem Soleimani. Now, can the U.S. raise similar stakes?
Well, we can't rule anything out. I think it's rather unlikely for the U.S. to begin targeting targets within Iran proper. We might see targeting of IRGC leaders outside of Iranian borders. Israel has already done that by targeting IRGC commanders based in Syria. So it's possible that the US might opt for the same modus operandi by targeting not only the Iraqi militias responsible directly or indirectly for those attacks, but also by targeting commanders of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards that are stationed and operational beyond Iran's borders. The issue here, I think, is that the US is in a difficult situation by supporting Israel's extremely problematic and destructive military campaign so unconditionally in Gaza. It has essentially outsourced its policy to Israel. This is a straightforward case of entrapment where the US is essentially risking escalation and paying the price of its unconditional support for Israel's bloody military campaign in Gaza. And what that means is that it provides Iran and Iran-backed militias in the region with ideological and political cover for them to continue perpetrating these attacks against US interests, but also against, for example, maritime security in the Red Sea.
And Dr. Al-Hassan, I'll take you back to the 1980s. The Beirut bombing in the 1980s saw the administration pull out from Lebanon, and we also saw troop withdrawals from Afghanistan. Now, in that context, how would you assess the current situation in West Asia?
So the US is obviously facing a big issue with force protection in the sense that its forces that are based in Syria, Iraq, Jordan and elsewhere are constantly under threat and under attack by Iran-backed militias. And so the issue of force protection, as we're seeing, is going to be a growing burden. In addition to that, there is growing political momentum within Iraq to expel US forces, and we've seen Iraq come very close to doing that, and this is something that might happen as well. The status of US forces in Syria is obviously very problematic from an international legal standpoint, and there are calls within the US for the US to withdraw its presence from Syria. And so I think these casualties are probably going to fuel these calls within the United States, the more isolationist camp within US politics, to curtail US involvement in the Middle East. Not to mention the fact that, as I said, the US's wholehearted support of Israel's campaign has obviously eroded regional political support for US policy, which makes, from a soft power perspective, the US presence and continued presence in the region more difficult to sustain.
Well, on that note, Dr. Al-Hassan, thanks for joining in and sharing your insights with us on this broadcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.